Hi, this is Michael Waits recording live from the Singapore FinTech Festival 2024. Thank you for joining us for this special edition of Insurance for the New Possible, where we discussed the most innovative ideas in FinTech. We are joined today by Sherry Jiang, a co-founder and the CEO of Peak. Thank you so much for joining us at the Singapore FinTech Festival 2024. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, and thank you so much for having me.
I am so happy you joined us. Look, let's jump right into this thing.
Awesome.
What makes Peak different from traditional personal budgeting or finance apps?
Absolutely. So people have probably heard of or are familiar with Mint.com.
Sure.
And there's been generations of other personal finance tracking apps since then as well.
Yeah.
And a lot of them focus on tracking, which, conjures images of dashboards and metrics and numbers.
But also a lot of inputting stuff.
A lot of inputting, right?
Right.
But for us, we're more than just a tracker. We're actually about helping people get to a decision the fastest they can about personal finance. It's not about, here's the numbers in front of you and you have to go through many steps to figure out what to do.
Right.
We guide you there. So that's where the AI portion actually comes into play for Peak. So the way that we work is that we want people to focus on what exactly they want to accomplish. So some people might go to Peak and say, hey, I want to figure out a good financial plan for myself over the next couple of years, which might include buying a house and figuring out what kind of mortgage makes sense.
Yeah, or putting my kid through school. Sorry, go ahead.
Putting kid through school, or hey, I want to potentially do a part-time or portfolio career, right?
Right.
After working at a corporate job. How would that look money-wise for me? And so you can go straight into that with the chat interface that we have within Peak. Now, of course, you have to connect your accounts to make sure that you have the data to answer those questions, but we're much more focused on the insights part. How do you actually get from point A to point B with sometimes relatively complex personal finance questions?
Can I ask you this? Is it proactive? And I'll tell you why I'm asking. In the old days, right, you said like Mint. I was so excited by Mint. I was so excited by Quicken, which is probably before your time.
But I know Quicken.
But I did all this work in it, but then it gave me nothing back.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? Like I had to do all this work myself to figure out, what does it mean if I spend this much money on that and this much money on that, or how much do I have left over for investing? And if I invest at this rate over time and I have to make up the rate myself, right? I'm really curious about, is it proactive where it sees things that are happening and then the AI and ML kind of jumps in and says, oh no, don't do that, or please do more of this kind of thing?
Yeah, so there's two components of AI in our app.
Tell me.
The more proactive one would actually be on our homepage, where we actually have widgets, we call them, that you can actually run reports and analyses. So those are more proactive in the sense that you can understand, hey, what is my concentration risk in my investment? So that happens when, let's say, you work at a company that gives you, publicly traded stocks like Google, and you're all of a sudden left with like 50% of your portfolio in Google, which is a lot, right?
A lot, yeah.
So we are proactive in the sense that you can kind of recalculate and generate that report to see what those risks are and what those mean to you. The more, I would say, user-guided experience would be the chat interface where you come in with a question. So we won't prompt you, but you can kind of ask a whole world of questions. So a recent one that I actually asked Peak is, how is the results of the 2024 elections going to affect my portfolio?
Oh my God, it is Tuesday.
And I'm actually checking the live results right now, but obvious things are, crypto will do well if there's a, Trump win for the election. But then, of course, you have to look at other industry makeups in your portfolio.
Other factors, yeah.
So in that sense, we have the proactive as well as the user-driven part. What we're working on additionally in the future is the even more proactive part, which is like, hey, before Michael, you even know, we're going to surface some insights to you so that you can get ahead of it. But that's in the roadmap still. Right,
but that's possible. So are you building bespoke LLMs for yourself and isolating all the unnecessary information from it, or are you just using a large language model to then be able to answer this stuff? Because the chat that you have is not like an old-fashioned chat where I put in a question, it gives me a stock answer, yeah?
No, absolutely
Go
not.
ahead.
So right now we do still leverage, LLMs like
existing
Claude,
ones.
the existing ones, right?
Yep.
Until we get to a point where we, build our own, train our own data sets and all of that.
Right.
But the way that it works is, just to geek out a little bit, we use basically an agentic model.
Okay.
So think of it as you have your own private team of people doing stock research for you, analyzing your portfolio, pulling in, historical data, and then synthesizing all that together for some kind of insight for you. So it's agentic in a sense that there's multiple agents or multiple kind of AIs doing that. But you can replace AI with human, and that's pretty much the same thing. You have your own team of people that help you answer questions.
So is there an opportunity here for like existing wealth management companies to be able to leverage the Peak platform to serve their clients? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, we do actually have a couple of people that have started using Peak for their clients, not just for themselves.
Right.
It's not the intention actually right now because we're still mostly a consumer product.
But you see what I mean though, right?
Yeah.
In other words, if I'm a wealth management guy or gal, and I have a bunch of different clients that have a bunch of different questions, they're asking me, it's a smart way for me to get answers for them really quickly, really intelligently, that they maybe don't even know the right questions to ask on their side.
That's definitely possible, I think, in the future.
Super interesting. So can I ask you this? How do you provide, because you talked about insights and personalized insights, but let's say like my brother and I, very similar cohorts and stuff like that, but different financial goals.
Yeah.
How do you handle the differences and the subtle differences between like what people want?
Yeah. So right now we have a flow in the app where you can actually enter in information like your age, number of dependents you have, your goals in terms of, let's say, a retirement number if you have it, risk appetite, which would scale from like conservative to like more risk on. And we actually get that information from you first. It's self-reported.
Right.
And then the insights that are generated is based on what you self-report. So if you're somebody who is like happy to take more risk, right? Like I'm somebody who's very happy to take some risk.
Where do you think I fall in this?
Well, I mean, that's up to you to decide, right? But if, some people are okay with like, max drawdown of 25% in their portfolio in a given year because they're like, hey, I have liquidity.
And I have time.
I have time, whatever, right? And that's fine. But if you're somebody who's trying to get to a point where you can like live off the fixed interest of your net worth in 5-10 years, probably shouldn't be taking as much risk because you never know if you're going to hit a 2022. Right. So all of this is so dependent on who you are as a person, which is why it's called personal finance. So we take the first step of just asking you to report, yourself, what you know about yourself so that we can give you better insights.
Does the AI differentiate its recommendations and insights even for people with like similar cohorts based on their age, right? Because if you're 55 or 25, just the time value of money is completely different.
It will differ depending on age for sure.
Okay.
Within the same cohort, if you're the same age, same risk appetite, same dependence and all of that, I mean, then the differences in the suggestions will be based on the current portfolio that you have.
Right.
But we're at a stage where it's going to be quite similar because we don't have the scale of, hundreds of thousands of millions of people to be able to fine tune it even further, right? So the level that we have at least right now is that for people who are at least, let's say there's 10 characteristics that you can self-report, we'll have different dimensions of suggestions based off of those.
Fair enough. So the AI stuff is relatively new in this context, particularly the LLM stuff, and it's moving really, really fast, right? So how do you keep up to date on this stuff and make sure that the insights that you're giving are still relevant based on all the new information and all the new tech that's coming out?
For sure. So at the top, right, I keep on top of Twitter very frequently. This is where actually you can get a lot of the latest in terms of LLM updates. So actually, one of the most interesting ones recently is from Anthropic that builds Claude. They have this thing called Computer Use API, which basically allows the AI to mimic clicking actions for you on your behalf on a virtual machine.
So what does that mean?
So it can book a ticket for you. So Michael, let's say you want to go to wherever, US, right? You're like, super lazy to book a ticket. You can actually leverage that to mimic what you would otherwise do to book. So it's kind of like AI virtual assistant in a sense.
So that brings up a really important point.
Yeah.
I used to trade an automated trading model.
Yeah.
Okay. And one of the things that I had to do is when I got the appropriate signal, I would have to call a broker and say, sell 100 contracts of the bunds for me, right? Or of the gilts, whatever it was, right?
Yeah.
Or I would leave a standing order with the broker, which I never wanted to do because they could actually force the execution or tell other people about my orders.
Yeah.
So are you suggesting that you could like not partner with, but API into this Anthropic Claude, and because it can mimic clicks, I could leave an order for it.
Yeah.
And then it could execute like buying 10 shares of Apple or 100 shares of Apple or selling them at a certain price.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, that's insane.
Yeah. So we're kind of getting there. And again, this is the worst the technology is ever going to be, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So of course, there's obviously kinks that you have to work through. So when you ask like, how do we make sure that the new technologies applied to our use case are giving good results?
Right.
The only way you do it is you have
testing.
to test and learn, right?
Right.
Where we just launched actually our own Peak AI experience yesterday in time for this conference. And we have this like contest right now with our community of beta testers where we're like, the person who files the most number of feedbacks for the AI gets a free t-shirt, gets this t-shirt.
Right.
So we have people sending us like, okay, this looked funny, this looked good. So that's the only way we get it, right? And good thing is that we have, users that are very much like aligned with the mission of what we're doing and are willing to give us that feedback to keep fine-tuning and improving the approach.
I remember the last time you and I spoke when you were on the Asia Tech podcast. I have so many ideas for this.
Yeah.
I really do. I can't think of enough of them. So this is challenging to build, right? You said you do get feedback from your users. What are some of these big challenges that you're focusing on when you're building this?
I mean, on the AI side of things, for sure, it's about the quality of the output as well as the right quantity of information in the output. And maybe I'll break those two down, right?
Please.
A recent issue that we found with the AI was that it was recognizing ETFs and mutual funds as financial services because Vanguard will create like an ETF, like VU, right? But the ETF is actually a representation of a lot of different sectors.
Some underlying thing.
But then our AI was actually classifying as financial services. So it was telling a bunch of people, hey, you're overweight in financial services when people were just doing the Boglehead
right
thing.
It could have been like a healthcare index or something. It could have been,
right? So that's one that, again, I can see why the AI is doing it because like Vanguard itself as a merchant, as a company, as financial services, but the underlying has a mix. So that's one that we had to catch.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then the quantity of the output is also very important because, what we've learned is there's a lot of analysis paralysis amongst people.
Sure, if you get too much information, it doesn't help.
It doesn't help, right? And so finding the right amount of information to present to users is also like a learning experience, right?
Yeah. So this actually brings up a really good point. Let's just, if we can separate people into two large categories.
Yeah.
People that never invest but want to be involved so they can build their net worth, right? So one good target. But people that have been investing, know enough to do it, but don't know the right things. Right? So how do you balance those two things without giving them too much information, but also improving the financial literacy of people that are already involved, but aren't always doing the right things?
Yeah. I would say that it is for sure challenging trying to balance, at least from a product perspective, those two user types. So maybe I'll like explain two like user profiles that are currently using Peak that belong in that category. One person who used to work at a fintech, focused on personal finance, so
should know stuff.
Savvy, right?
Right, should know
and
stuff.
And then one other person who is, kind of like me, like 30 years old, female, and just started to get into investing maybe a couple years ago because she looked at her savings and was like, hey, I have 6 figures of this and I should probably
what should I do? I should
figure
do something.
out what to do, right? So I would say that their usage of Peak is going to be a little bit different, and the way that they select the personality, the responses will be different. So in user one, fintech person, they are going to be asking questions like, can you tell me what is the Sharpe ratio of my portfolio, right? I mean, that's probably something that only people who are kind of savvy know.
No.
And so we'll focus on actually answering that question quantitatively, very deterministically to show, hey, this is what you're getting in terms of risk-adjusted rate of return in your portfolio. We'll show more charts and then show you the actual like stock holdings, right? So that could be a lot more like report generation, a lot more numbers. For person number two, right, just started investing, she is actually going to be using Peak as more of a learning tool as she is doing. So it's like, okay, as I'm investing, can I ask questions around, okay, these are ETFs. How do I determine which are the different ETFs I invest in? Because QQQ, which is very tech-weighted, versus VTI, which is more broad-based, are very different. So how do I, evaluate between the two of them? What's the overlap between the two of them? So for her, it's going to be a lot more kind of, let me do something and let me learn kind of interaction model. So we can, again, support both because we're able to actually tell the AI what kind of personality they should be adopting.
So here's the thing that I know is going to happen. Right, user number two is going to start investing, start learning things, then start talking to her friends, like after work on Friday about I made this investment, I did that thing, and then they're going to ask her, what's your Sharpe ratio? And she's going to come back to Peak and ask you.
Yeah, she can ask what's Sharpe ratio, and then Peak will tell you, this is your Sharpe ratio, and how do you interpret it in your portfolio?
Exactly.
Because one of the best ways to learn is not just reading
No.
Investopedia, but like how do you connect the knowledge to
what you're doing?
Your own, what you're doing in your own context.
Exactly. So I want to talk a little bit about data sources, because you're building this entirely new platform. Do you also use alternative sources of data, right, to kind of help people through their investment thing?
Yeah. So there's a few places where we draw data in. One is obviously the APIs that we connect to the actual accounts where people are logged in and they want to,
that's really
consolidate their portfolio and everything.
Right.
Then we also connect via a tool called Perplexity. It's basically an AI research tool that does search a little bit better than the other LLMs, and I think a little bit better than Google. Hopefully I don't get in trouble for saying that. I still hold Google shares. So that, again, helps kind of summarize in a very semi-academic way, like a specific topic, right?
Right.
And then of course we connect
with sourcing, by the way.
With sourcing.
Right.
So that will be good for questions around knowledge base, like what is fixed income, right? Perplexity will give a really good response there.
Yeah.
But we also pull in real-time data, which will connect to things like Yahoo Finance, which will give you the stock data of the stock price information of, let's say, Tesla. Perplexity may not be as real-time, but if you connect to APIs that are giving kind of second to second, minute by minute updates, then you can make better decisions using that real-time information.
Real-time data.
So we're piping all of this through into Peak. And then the final layer is the whole, I would say, the entire universe of knowledge that the LLMs are trained on themselves, which, we don't know the exact ones one by one.
Right.
But I mean, it's whatever at the scale of the internet has been transpiring over the last couple of years, boiled down into what they think or Claude thinks is relevant to the user at that point in time.
Okay, I'll let you go after this. What are some of the new trends, products, or services that are AI powered that excite you?
Wow. I mean, I think there's...
you seem kind of excited about this.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot. I'll talk about one that
Please.
I have loved recently. So I taught myself how to code with AI over the summer. It was this crazy idea I had where I'm let me just find a way to prototype and test things without bothering my engineering team all the time. So can I actually build apps?
Do this myself,
right? Can I do this myself? And so I started using something called Cursor, which is basically a AI code editor, and you can use language, like human language, to build apps.
So I want to do this thing and I want to build this table or whatever, and it builds it for you.
Describe the table, describe the makeup and the layout of the page, describe navigation. You click on this button, it brings you to this new page. And it's been an absolute ball, actually. I've actually created a few finance apps myself. Some actually have been integrated in some way into Peak. So if you look at some of our tools, where you can calculate things like...
You built some of them?
Yeah, I built some of them. If should you rent or buy property, right? So I just built that. So that's something really exciting to me, not just for what it's helped me in isolation, but what it can unlock for more and more people, billions of people around the world who have ideas, have ways they want to improve something with technology, but they're I can't code. And that's so many people. So I'm very, very excited about how AI is actually democratizing the ability to actually build your own applications.
That is awesome. Sherry Jiang, a co-founder and the CEO of Peak. Thank you so much for doing this.
For sure. Thank you,
Michael. I really
Michael.
appreciate it.